The storm ripped across the valley, lightning tearing open the sky as Elara stumbled through the ruins, her heart pounding louder than the thunder. Ash clung to her lips, and her eyes burned with unshed tears. Dorian shouted her name, his voice raw with desperation, but she could barely hear him over the crash of collapsing stone. "Do not follow me," Elara cried, though her body trembled with fear and longing. She turned, her cloak snapping in the wind, and saw Kaelen standing in the distance, his hand extended in command, power crackling around him like fire. Dorian roared, "Stay away from her." His words were thick with fury, yet fear threaded them. Elara's chest ached as Kaelen's cruel smile curved, his dark eyes locking with hers. She whispered to herself, "Why now?" The world seemed to fracture in that moment, as though love and destruction had chosen the same breath to collide. Elara pressed her palm against her chest, her breath ragged as she stumbled beneath the broken archway. The storm thinned, but its echoes remained in her bones. Dorian caught up, his hand grasping her shoulder, firm yet trembling. "You cannot run from me," he said, his tone caught between anger and fear. She turned to him, eyes glistening, and whispered, "I was never meant to survive this." His jaw tightened, pain etched in his expression. The ruins groaned as debris fell around them, and for a moment silence pressed heavier than the storm. Dorian drew her close, shielding her, but she shoved him away. "If you protect me now, it will cost everything," she cried. His voice broke as he said, "Then let it cost me, not you." The air was heavy with smoke as Kaelen's voice slithered across the ruins, mocking and sharp. "You cannot deny what binds us," he called, his tone smooth and venomous. Elara's hands curled into fists, her knuckles white. "You know nothing of me," she shouted, her voice breaking. Dorian stood between them, blade drawn, his stance protective but strained. Sparks of red magic drifted through the air, stinging her skin. Kaelen's shadow stretched impossibly long, twisting across the stone. Dorian said, "She will never be yours." Kaelen laughed, the sound deep and cruel, echoing like a curse. Elara's chest heaved, torn between rage and despair, as the storm refused to quiet. Elara's knees buckled as the earth cracked, a pulse of dark energy spreading outward. Dorian caught her, lifting her against his chest, his breath ragged. She whispered, "Why does he hold such power over me?" Dorian's jaw clenched as he answered, "Because he fears losing you." The truth sliced into her, heavier than the weight of stone. Kaelen stepped closer, his steps deliberate, the storm bending to his presence. Elara shuddered, pressing her face against Dorian's chest. "I can't endure this," she murmured. Dorian lowered his head, whispering, "You're stronger than you believe." Her eyes fluttered, torn between breaking and holding on, as Kaelen's shadow engulfed them both. The storm broke for a heartbeat, moonlight spilling across shattered stone. Elara raised her head, eyes shimmering with both fear and defiance. "If destiny is real, then why does it feel like a cage?" she asked, her voice trembling but strong. Dorian looked at her, his expression softening with sorrow. "Because cages can be gilded, but they still confine." Kaelen's laughter rumbled in the distance, low and taunting. Elara gripped Dorian's hand, her fingers cold but unyielding. "Then I'll shatter it," she said, voice cracking into resolve. The ruins groaned as another tremor surged, and in that fragile moment, her vow felt like a spark against the endless dark. Morning crept over the valley, pale light seeping through the haze of ruin. Elara sat upon a fractured stone, her fingers tracing the cracks as if searching for meaning in their scars. Dorian stood nearby, silent but unyielding, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "You watched me break last night," she whispered, her voice thin but resolute. He turned, his gaze softening though shadows lingered. "You did not break," he said. "You endured." Elara's lips trembled with a bitter smile. "Enduring feels like drowning." His hand hovered near hers, never touching but close enough to burn. The silence stretched, filled with words unsaid, until the cry of a raven cut the air, sharp and foreboding. They followed the path deeper into the forest, where morning dew clung to leaves like fragile jewels. The world seemed deceptively calm, yet Elara's chest remained tight. "Why does he know me?" she asked, her voice breaking. Dorian's steps slowed, his jaw tense. "Because your blood carries truth you were never told." She stopped, her breath sharp. "What truth?" His silence was heavier than stone. Birds stirred above, scattering with sudden wings, as if the forest itself recoiled. Dorian finally said, "You are bound to them, Elara. Bound to a kingdom you've never seen, and to power that hunts you now." Elara's breath caught as she leaned against a moss-cloaked tree, her hand pressing the bark. "You kept this from me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Dorian's expression flickered with guilt. "I was sworn to protect you, not burden you." Her eyes flashed, tears burning. "Protection is a cage when it keeps me blind." His jaw tightened, his shoulders rigid. A gust stirred leaves around them, carrying the faint scent of smoke. Elara lifted her chin, forcing steel into her voice. "If I'm bound to this fate, I'll face it myself." For the first time his gaze wavered, torn between loyalty and longing. The path opened into a glade, sunlight spilling over wildflowers swaying in the breeze. Elara stepped forward, her cloak brushing petals, her breath unsteady. "This world feels like it remembers me," she murmured. Dorian's hand tightened on his sword hilt, eyes scanning the shadows. "Because it does." Her heart lurched, both in awe and terror. A faint shimmer flickered at the glade's edge, like a veil of light bending. She reached toward it, her fingers trembling. Dorian caught her wrist, his grip urgent. "Not yet," he warned, his voice sharp with fear. Her eyes locked on his, filled with equal parts longing and fury. A chill wind stirred, carrying whispers that were not the forest's own. Elara froze, her skin prickling as unseen voices threaded the air. "They call for me," she whispered, voice shaking. Dorian drew closer, his hand resting lightly on her arm. "They test you," he said, his voice grim. The light shimmer thickened, shapes flickering like phantoms at the edge of sight. Elara's breath caught as she stared, heart torn between dread and longing. "If I answer, will I lose myself?" she asked. Dorian's eyes darkened, his voice low. "If you don't, we may all be lost." Twilight draped the forest in shadow as Elara pressed forward, her breath shallow and quick. Dorian walked close, his blade unsheathed, but his eyes lingered more on her than the path. "You keep secrets still," she said softly, voice sharp with unease. He stopped, the fading light carving hard lines into his face. "I keep what might save you," he replied, though the weight in his tone betrayed the truth. Her heart twisted at his words, torn between gratitude and fury. The silence pressed tight, broken only by the hush of wind through darkening leaves. When his hand brushed hers, it burned like fire and warning all at once. The air shifted suddenly, charged with energy that prickled her skin. Kaelen's voice seeped from the darkness, smooth and taunting. "Secrets weigh heavier than chains, don't they?" Elara spun, her cloak flaring as her eyes narrowed. Dorian stepped in front of her, blade raised, but Kaelen emerged from the shadows with ease, his silver hair catching moonlight like a crown. "You hide truths from her," he said to Dorian, his smile venomous. "Shall I speak them?" Elara's breath caught, her heart slamming against her ribs. She whispered, "Don't." Kaelen's grin deepened, feeding on her fear. Kaelen circled them like a predator, his dark eyes glinting with cruel amusement. "She is bound to me more than she is to you," he said, his voice silk and steel. Elara's stomach churned, her fists trembling as she whispered, "Lies." Dorian snarled, stepping forward with blade gleaming in faint light. "Your poison won't touch her." Kaelen laughed, the sound echoing unnaturally across the trees. He stopped, gaze locking with Elara's, softer now, dangerous. "But she feels it, doesn't she? The pull she cannot deny." Heat surged through her chest, leaving her both terrified and shaken by the truth she would not admit aloud. The ground trembled faintly, as if echoing the storm within her chest. Elara gasped when Kaelen's power shimmered in the air, red sparks drifting close enough to sting. Dorian swung his blade, dispersing the energy, but Kaelen only chuckled, unbothered. "Every step she takes brings her closer to me," he said coldly. Elara's eyes burned with tears as she cried, "I choose my own path." Her voice carried across the glade, raw with defiance. Kaelen tilted his head, his smile sharpening. "We shall see." The forest stilled, silence pressing down until even the leaves dared not move. Elara's heart thundered as Kaelen stepped closer, his shadow stretching long across the ground. Dorian raised his blade, but Elara thrust her hand out, stopping him. "This is mine," she said, her voice shaking but fierce. Kaelen's smirk faltered for a heartbeat as he studied her, then curved sharper. Courage tastes sweeter than fear. Her hand trembled, yet fire sparked in her gaze. Dorian's chest rose and fell sharply, torn between stopping her and trusting her strength. The three stood locked in fragile stillness, the world holding its breath, as though destiny itself waited on Elara's choice. The ruins gave way to an ancient hall, its cracked pillars etched with forgotten runes glowing faintly in the moonlight. Elara's breath caught as whispers threaded through the walls, calling her name. Dorian stepped ahead, his sword lowered, awe mingling with fear in his eyes. "This place knows you," he said quietly. She pressed her palm to the stone, warmth pulsing beneath her touch. "It remembers," she whispered, shuddering. The air shifted, heavy with grief, as a shadow emerged at the far end, a figure once beloved, now twisted. Her chest clenched. "Do. It can't be," she murmured, voice breaking. From the shadows stepped Eric, the fallen hero, his once bright eyes dulled to storm gray, his armor fractured and stained. Elara staggered back, tears brimming. "Arik?" she whispered, voice laced with disbelief. He smiled faintly, bitter and hollow. "Did you think me gone so easily?" Dorian's stance stiffened, blade raised, his voice edged with fury. "You betrayed us." Arik's gaze lingered on Elara, soft with regret, sharp with obsession. "I loved you too much to fade." The hall trembled faintly, as if echoing his words. Elara's knees threatened to buckle beneath the weight of memory and grief. Arik's voice carried like a confession, trembling yet unyielding. "I bled for the kingdom, and they abandoned me. Only power kept me alive." Elara shook her head, anguish etched across her face. "No, this isn't you." He stepped closer, each movement deliberate, torn between yearning and wrath. Dorian snarled, his sword glinting. "Stay back." Arik's eyes flickered with pain as he said, "She deserves to know the truth. Who she is, what binds her." Elara's breath caught as his words slid into her soul like shards of glass. She whispered, "Tell me, or leave me broken." The runes flared brighter as Arik raised his hand, power coursing like fire through broken stone. "You are heir to the Fae's shattered heart, Elara," he declared, his voice cracking under the weight of truth. Her vision blurred as the hall shook, dust spiraling in the air. Dorian caught her arm, steadying her as her knees weakened. "No, it can't be," she whispered, panic clawing her chest. Eric's gaze softened with longing. "You were born for this, not to hide in shadow." The hall's light pulsed, casting them in hues of crimson and gold, as destiny bared its teeth. Elara's heart thundered as the hall grew still, its glow fading to embers. She met Arik's eyes, torn by memory and betrayal. "If I am heir," she whispered, "then my choices will shape more than myself." His expression fractured, regret and obsession colliding in his storm-gray gaze. Dorian's hand brushed hers, anchoring her. "You're not alone," he said softly, his voice steady despite the storm within him. Arik turned away, shadows clinging to his broken armor. "Then choose, Elara, love or destiny." The silence that followed was heavier than battle, her chest aching with the impossible weight of both. Night cloaked a glade, moonlight fractured by storm clouds rolling overhead. Elara stood trembling, her chest burning with truths she could no longer deny. Dorian reached for her, his voice raw. "I will bear this with you." She shook her head, tears streaking her face. "You cannot bear what is mine." A sudden surge of crimson light tore the sky as Kaelen appeared, his power dripping like venom. "She was never yours," he sneered, his gaze sharp and cruel. Dorian stepped forward, blade gleaming. Elara's voice cracked, desperate. "Stop this, both of you. You'll destroy everything." The earth quaked under Kaelen's power, roots tearing free as sparks licked the ground. Dorian slashed through the glow, his blade singing with defiance, but the force hurled him back. Elara cried out, rushing to him, her hands trembling over his chest. "Dorian." His eyes flickered open, voice weak but resolute. "I will not yield." Kaelen's laughter echoed, deep and merciless. "He is dust beside me." Elara's heart tore, caught between fear and fury. "You both fight for me, yet neither sees me," she shouted, her voice breaking. Her words rang heavy, silencing even the storm for a breath. Kaelen's power rippled, casting shadows that writhed like serpents. Elara rose, her hands trembling, but defiant. "If I am bound to you, it will not be as your pawn." His smirk faltered, his eyes narrowing in hunger and rage. Dorian forced himself to his feet, blood at his lip, blade steady though his body swayed. "You will never have her." Kaelen's snarl split the air as red energy flared, clashing with steel in a burst of sparks. Elara screamed, her voice carrying through the chaos. "Enough! I will not be broken between you." Her words cracked like lightning. The storm howled, tearing branches from the trees as Kaelen's fury blazed. Dorian staggered but pressed forward, his blade slicing through fire, sparks burning his skin. Elara reached out, her voice raw with desperation. "Stop. This war is mine to end." Kaelen's eyes burned with cruel desire as he hissed, "You cannot escape what you are." Her chest heaved, terror and strength warring inside her. She whispered to herself, "Then let it consume me, not them." The air pulsed violently, her own power stirring for the first time, faint golden light bleeding from her trembling hands. The ground split open, swallowing roots and stone as the clash of power roared. Elara's golden light surged, colliding with Kaelen's crimson fury in a blinding storm. Dorian shielded his eyes, shouting her name. "Elara." Her voice cracked with agony. "I cannot hold it." Kaelen screamed, his form flickering like shattered glass. For a moment, the storm fell silent, golden embers raining like tears across the ruins. Elara collapsed, her body limp in Dorian's arms, her lips trembling as she whispered, "Love is the only power left to me." Her words faded as darkness closed around her. The battlefield glowed with fire and shadow as dawn broke red across the horizon. Elara stirred in Dorian's arms, golden light flickering faintly around her trembling hands. "I am not finished," she whispered, forcing herself to rise. Dorian's grip tightened, fear raw in his eyes. "You've given enough, Elara." She turned, her gaze burning through exhaustion. "Not until he is ended." Kaelen rose from the ruin, his robes scorched, silver hair whipping in the wind. His laugh cracked like thunder. "Even broken you shine. And that is why you are mine." Elara's heart clenched, but her feet held steady. Winds howled as Kaelen summoned crimson fire that twisted like serpents, scorching the earth. Elara raised her hands, golden light clashing violently with his storm, sparks showering like stars. Dorian stood between them, blade drawn, his voice fierce. "You will not touch her again." Kaelen sneered, hurling power that struck the sword, sparks exploding across the air. Elara screamed, her energy flaring brighter. "No, this ends with me." The ground cracked beneath her feet, light and shadow bleeding into the soil. The battlefield shook, trees tearing at their roots as magic ripped the sky open. The clash ignited the air, thunder rolling as fire and light collided. Elara staggered, but her eyes burned with relentless fury. "You cannot claim me," she shouted, her voice carrying like a battle cry. Kaelen snarled, his face twisted with rage and desire. "You were made for me." Dorian lunged, steel meeting crimson power, his roar breaking the storm. Sparks erupted, showering the ground in embers. Elara's golden aura flared higher, her body trembling under its weight. For a heartbeat, silence followed. Then her cry shattered it. "I am my own." The storm split with her words. Kaelen reeled, his power faltering as Elara's light pierced the storm. Yet his grin returned, cruel and hollow. "If I cannot have you, I will see you destroyed." He raised both hands, crimson fire surging like a tidal wave. Dorian stepped before Elara, bracing his body as a shield. She cried out, shoving him aside, her golden power exploding into a barrier that split the wave. The force hurled her back, pain ripping through her chest. Kaelen stumbled, scorched by her defiance, but his eyes gleamed with obsession. "You cannot win against your fate," he hissed. The storm roared to its peak, lightning splitting the sky as Elara rose one final time, golden fire consuming her trembling frame. Dorian shouted her name, fear shattering his voice. She turned to him, her eyes glowing, tears streaking her cheeks. "If love is power, then let it end here." She thrust both hands forward, golden light spiraling into a torrent that struck Kaelen full force. His scream ripped the dawn, his body unraveling like ash in wind. The light faded, leaving silence and embers drifting. Elara fell into Dorian's arms, her body limp, her voice a whisper. Was it enough? The battlefield lay silent, the storm dissolved into pale dawn. Smoke curled from shattered earth as embers drifted like fading stars. Dorian cradled Elara, his breath uneven, his eyes fierce with fear and love. She stirred faintly, her voice a whisper. "I am still here." His chest shook with relief, tears glistening though he tried to hide them. "You nearly broke me," he said softly. Elara's lips curved in a fragile smile. "You kept me whole." Around them, the ruins groaned, the weight of victory heavy as grief. For every ember that faded, the cost lingered. Elara pushed herself upright, trembling but resolute. "It is not over," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the ruins. Dorian frowned, confusion in his expression. "Kaelen is gone." Her gaze lingered where his ashes scattered. Gone but not ended. Shadows linger when hearts cling. He reached for her hand, steadying her. "Then we faced the shadows together." Her chest ached, both at the promise and at the fear of what remained. The wind stirred, cool and solemn, carrying whispers of distant voices, as if the land itself still mourned. She closed her eyes, holding tighter to Dorian's hand. They moved slowly through the ruins, their steps echoing on fractured stone. Elara paused at a fallen pillar, her palm brushing its runes, the warmth gone. "It feels empty," she murmured, her voice raw with grief. Dorian's arm wrapped around her shoulders, drawing her close. "Emptiness means it can be rebuilt." Her throat tightened, her eyes stinging. "Rebuilt with what's left of us?" He met her gaze, steady and unyielding. "With love, with fire, with the strength you've never seen in yourself." She leaned into him, her weight heavy, her spirit fragile yet flickering with fragile hope. At the edge of the valley, the forest stirred back to life, birds returning hesitantly. Elara stopped, staring at the horizon washed in gold. "I feared I would never see the sun again," she whispered. Dorian turned, studying her face, his own softened with quiet awe. "And yet, you are brighter than the dawn." Heat rose in her cheeks, her lips trembling between sorrow and smile. She said, "If I survive, it is because of you." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his hand lingering. "No, because of you." Silence bound them as the sun climbed higher. The world hushed as Elara and Dorian stood together, dawn painting the sky in fire and gold. She leaned into him, her voice soft, almost broken. What if love cannot save us? His arms encircled her, steady and sure. Then let love be what we fight for. Her heart swelled, her eyes shimmering as she pressed her forehead against his. Then I will fight until my last breath. The wind lifted their cloaks, the embers of night fading into day. In that fragile fleeting moment, hope felt real, eternal, like the final heartbeat of a story that would never be forgotten.